everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mike's, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. I am Evan Irwin, to get started each Top 10 by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
Happy Monday.
Ruben Bressler.
Returned from the dead.
Oh my God.
I've been reborn from the giant black sarcophagus. I drank the mysterious red liquid, and you're okay. That's enough of that.
I wish I could take the credit for this, but
you know, you're back, and we appreciate that. We had a bit of I don't know if a scare's the right thing, but
yeah, I mean, I'm just like the beta is not complete yet.
The testing's still underway.
Yeah, I still blue screen every once in a while. We got to work on it, but
right.
We'll clean it up in post.
That's terrific. All right, well, we also began with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most luxuriant and letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 elves. Ruben?
Well, the winner this week is not an elf. The winner this week is Yoki Dragon, who writes, "Okay, crew, we need to talk. I'm a bit disappointed in all of you, because how can you talk about either top 10 elves or pauper elves without mentioning the mana engine by which pauper elves runs? The fact Priest of Titania, the first massive mana engine for elves, didn't make it baffles me. It's a 4-of in pauper, while it's fallen away now as a mainstay in Legacy, and a card in every green elf deck in EDH. Yes, it's only a mana dork, but it's a mana dork that allows for insane turns, like Ruben's aforementioned Lead the Stampede, winky face. Also, again, she's the first elf to make mana for all elves. Priest did it first, all the way back in Urza's Saga."
I love the comments that start off with, you done screwed up, or we need to talk. Those are my favorites.
Yeah, hey, y'all.
Yeah, we had a lot of love for Priest of Titania this week.
Yeah.
We had some good some excellent comments about a lot of good elves, but I think that Priest was certainly from a popularity standpoint the one that needed to be the winner here.
Elves of Deep Shadow was one that someone else recommended, and I was like, oh, that's such a good one. And I would have picked that one if I had remembered.
Yeah, Priest is insane. Like, for those who don't know, it's a green in a generic mana for a 1/1 common elf. You tap to add a green to your mana pool for each elf on the battlefield. First of all, that counts both halves. If you play the mirror and elves, that gets really stupid.
Yep.
Secondly,
not even just the mirror. You can play against Stompy, and sometimes they play things like Nettle Sentinel in their deck.
I didn't even know it counts every elf on the board.
Yeah.
Because it's old and it's dumb, and that's what they used to do back in the day. It was like, whatever, man, you kill everything out there.
There are elves that do stuff like that.
Yeah, and this is definitely one of them, and just does unfair things in that format really, really quickly, and I agree is worthy of a slot.
And it's another case of Magic Mike's not respecting Rebecca Gay, obviously, with the iconic Priest of Titania art.
Hashtag gay pride. I mean, they love their Rebecca Gay.
That is a disturbing trend. We gotta fix that.
It's still like our anti-gay sentiments.
It's still like a $5 or $6 card, even though it's been reprinted like 3 or 4 times, which is awesome.
Isn't it a common too?
Yeah,
common.
But it was in the Commander 2014, and it was in the Commander Anthology. So those aren't the most accessible of products, ultimately.
$6
sure.
common.
Yeah, I mean, that's how popular she happens to be. Yeah. So, Yoki Dragon, you have a $50 gift certificate with your name on it from CoolStuffInc.com. Thanks so much, Cool Stuff, for providing that. Get in contact with us over one of our social media channels, and we'll get you your prize. And then Aaron will remind me about it. I'll be like, Evan.
Or you'll remind me because I wasn't clear on the process.
Aaron. It's fine. It's what we do here. But we have to move on to our top 10 equipment. Now, it sounds, or at least it feels like to me, Old Man Magic, that we've not had equipment for that long, but we kind of had like 260-something equipment these days, and that's plenty. That's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I actually thought that this list was a little bit more difficult to curate because when we did Wizards, we had 600-some choices. God forbid we ever do Humans and we get to choose between the 2,000 that exist. But usually there's a lot larger of a card pool to pick from. This one was actually a lot smaller, a lot fewer options, in my opinion.
And as a result, we have the Aaron show tonight, as usual.
Well,
I'm so sorry. Like, YouTube is like really, again, like...
We'll talk about our favorites as they get brought up. I don't have any until like number 8, so I'll see you then with my oodles of hires and sames. We're going to get started here with number 10. Ruben, do you have one?
Nope, I got 4 hires. You have more than I do. You have 5 hires. I have 4 hires.
5 hires.
But there's a nice smattering. I'm not too bad with the clumps.
Wow. Okay, that's a way to put that. Aaron, what's your number 10?
I'm going to try to keep up with the clumps with my number 10. My number 10 came out as part of Magic 2015. And Magic 2015 was a very unique set in that it was the first set that I'm aware of, at least, that they publicly announced that they brought in other people from the gaming community to help design cards. I believe Genesis Hydra was one of them. There was the Sadist card, Cruel Sadist, I think, was one of them. And there was a whole cycle of them, and this happened to be one of them. This was designed by a man named James Ernest. He is known as the owner and lead designer of Cheap Ass Games. Hopefully I can say that on the show. It's a real word. I didn't just make it up. Yep. And I love this. I just love the flavor of it. And a lot of the picks on my list are flavorful cards because most of my encounters with the equipment happen through EDH, where it's meant to be kind of fun and not too serious. So a lot of the cards on my list are not very good, but they've certainly made an impact on me in terms of fun or flavor. And we're going to kick things off at number 10, which is Hot Soup.
Yeah.
So Hot Soup is 1 colorless. It's an artifact equipment. It says equipped creature can't be blocked. Whenever equipped creature is dealt damage, destroy it. It has an equip cost of 3, and the flavor text just says "coming through." And the flavor text, you see what appears to be a goblin with a giant cauldron of soup. And the text really complements it. When you see somebody carrying hot soup, you step aside, which is the callback to being unblockable or can't be blocked. But if God forbid you stumble or that soup spills, you burn somebody, which is the destroying them effect. And so I just really wanted to start things off with a very flavorful pick, and just nothing's more fun than I remember even pre-releasing this set and people calling it out when they hot soup when they open the pack, and just nothing else like it. It's fun.
Yeah, this was very, very close to my top 10. Like, this was in the actual, like, my final list, or just right. Which number 8? What's number 9? What's number 10? This was up there. This is a really cool, fun, flavorful. Like, we have a card in Magic called Hot Soup. Like,
yeah,
it's ridiculous. It doesn't need
you can
to be...
equip. You can hand the hot soup to someone else. That is delightful.
And they can run with it. And I think it's so fun. It's just a fun card. All right. So we had a number 10. Ruben, do you have a number 9?
I do. I have a weirdo at number 9. I wanted to add a couple of cards that I didn't think that other folks would have on the list. And one of them appears to be the equipment that is most played in equipment-themed EDH decks, according to EDHRec.com. This equipment is the one that you run in the decks where you want a artifact equipment-centric, your SRAM, your Rafik of the Menes, your Kembaka Regents, your Valdukes. This equipment, apparently, by a wide margin, is played in the most of those decks. My number 9 is Hammer of Nazan. So, buckle in, because I actually am not that familiar with this.
It's a newer card, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very new card. Hammer of Nazan is a 4 colorless mana artifact, legendary equipment. Whenever Hammer of Nazan or another equipment enters the battlefield under your control, you may attach that equipment to target creature you control. The equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has indestructible, and it equips for 4. So it costs 4, equips for 4, illustrated by our good close personal friend of the show, Victor Adame Menges, and hasn't been out that long. Only came out in Commander 2017, no reprintings yet. And is one of 2 references to the character Nazan, the revered blacksmith. Obviously has their own card. Who is a Leonin from Naya, who was a blacksmith that was in the confluence and the conflux of the shards. I think was mysteriously transported to Bant, and as a result, just started making weapons there instead. And sort of in the conflux of that sort of formation, gained a kind of a superpower where he has the ability to hold hot, fiery metal. Very useful when you're a blacksmith, and very useful when you're holding the Hammer of Nazan.
Wow, because Nazan himself will let you go tutor for an equipment, and if you reveal the hammer, you just play it. I mean, put it on the battlefield. You don't actually cast it. And then Hammer Nazan says whenever it or something else enters, you can attach it. So all of a sudden, Nazan by himself is a 7/4 indestructible.
Cat Artificer.
Yeah. Nazan's very much what they call the Voltron style of commander, where you don't necessarily go wide, but you have this very big, obnoxious threat. And I actually faced a Nazan deck the other day when I was at Minneapolis, and he was just like, please bounce it, please bounce it, please bounce it. We had a lot of bouncy castle spells going around, and it took me a while to realize what he was trying to do, but then I would see how fast this thing would be suited up, and one of the things that he was suited up with was the hammer, and it was very, very good.
I think Wizards calls this battle cruiser magic. This was Rise of the Eldrazi-esque. You've got one guy, but he's awesome, so let's see what we can do with it and make all the removal terrible so everybody gets their one giant thing. Which was
just a really cool, unique effect. Obviously not a hugely competitive card, but scary.
Sure. So, Aaron, what's your number 9?
Ixalan and Rivals of Ixalan really leaned on the pirate motif. Vraska was even a pirate, which I think a lot of people never saw coming if you were to try to guess what her storyline would look like. And so we saw a lot of things having to do with pirates. We saw the ship that flipped over and turned into like a base of sorts, and we saw cannons and walking the plank. And this card came out, and if I remember correctly, it was either leaked or like parts of it had come out. Like we weren't really clear as to what the whole card looked like. And I remember even discussing it on the show, and I think, Evan, you'd even done like a Twitter poll of like, if the card did this, how much mana would you expect to pay for it or something like that? And so, and I really like this card. I think if you're gonna have a pirate themed set, you have to have something like this. We also talk about cards that we're surprised haven't been made yet. Like when you look at this, you're like, really? We've gone 25 years in this game and no one's ever made a pirate's hook before? My number 9 is Captain's Hook. So Captain's Hook is 3 colorless. It's an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+0, has menace, and is a pirate in addition to its other creature types. Whenever Captain's Hook becomes unattached from a permanent, destroy that permanent. Equip cost 1. I love the flavor of if it wasn't a pirate before, it is a pirate now. And likewise, if you cut off the hook, you basically cut off somebody's arm. And if you're in a world like this one, like Ixalan, I'm guessing the medical care isn't great. So if you just lop off an arm, you probably go and die. And so that's where the destroy part comes from. And so very flavorful. I love the art. I love the way that it was sort of introduced to us. And I don't think you could have had a pirate theme set without a card like this.
And absolutely, it was super cool. And the idea essentially that if this were to cost 2 or 1 mana, God forbid, this would probably be this would drive the metagame. This would be a force to be reckoned with. You would have artifact destruction, like a Braids would be the most important card in Standard to have, because something like this is ridiculous if you cost it too low. So if you cost it too high, quote unquote, then all of a sudden the spikes don't care about it, then more it's about the flavor, and you just have a super cool pirate deck. And this thing doesn't cost, well, it costs basically nothing these days. It's the crappiest of crap players. But that's okay, because it's cool, and that matters. Yeah. All right. Well, Captain's Hook was totally sweet. Move on here to number 8. Oh my God, I have one.
Yes.
Wow.
It's incredible. And I'm not super surprised that I'm guessing it's not on anyone else's list, not one of your hires, but it may be. This was an artifact that showed up in a world where planeswalkers were ruling all. There wasn't a ton of creature sort of stuff going around, and basically one person put 2 and 2 together. If this equipment plus this creature happens, oh my God, I'm going to wreck this format because these 2 things exist. And Wizards is very hesitant about making creatures that ping other things that, hit a creature, a player, whatever. Because if you have something like Cunning Sparkmage, and if you have a card like Basilisk Collar, you're going to kill anything and everything it deals damage to, and that is amazing. Basilisk Collar is a 1 generic mana rare equipment from Worldwake. The equipped creature has Death Touch and Lifelink, and you equip for 2. And just to complete the combo here, Cunning Sparkmage is also from the same set. They've literally put them together in the same set. Cunning Sparkmage is is an uncommon red and 2 generic mana for an 0/1 human shaman, but it has haste, and it deals 1 damage to a creature or player. So the cool part was that you would equip the Basilisk Collar, right? And you would ping the thing, right? And then you'd be like, and I gain life. And it was just the best. It was just the best feeling, because it was such a kick, right? Like, not only are they losing their best whatever, you gain a life.
Basilisk Collar has also seen play in Modern in the Eldrazi decks, specifically when they run Endbringer. So you slap that on an Endbringer, and then you sort of do the same thing. Endbringer is also able to untap more frequently than other creatures. It also helps them race. Eldrazi decks tend to not run a lot of removal, and so just sometimes putting it on a 4/4 Thought-Knot Seer is good game against the burn decks and against opposing creature decks.
Yeah, I mean, it's good, it's cheap, it's powerful.
This was my number 10, so you did actually pick off my higher. Basilisk Collar. I mean, I had a ton of fun using Basilisk Collar with things like Spike Shot Elder. It saw play throughout its life cycle in Standard. Obviously, Cunning Spark Mage is the dream, but Lifelink and Death Touch, that's just good enough for the price.
Yeah, and I mean, and this also saw, is it Staticaster, right?
Oh, yeah.
That saw a little bit of love with the Basilisk Collar combo. I've seen that running around. Ruben, what's number 8?
My number 8 is, the list of cards that have won a Pro Tour is short. It just is. The list of artifacts that have won a Pro Tour is short. The list of equipment that has won a Pro Tour, it's less than 10. One of the artifacts, one of the equipment that's won a Pro Tour was not just winning a Pro Tour. It dominated it was one of the most dominant decks of all time. How quickly we forget that Stoneforge Mystic didn't always go and get Sword of Feast and Famine out of Caw-Blade. The other equipment that was in that deck was Sylvok Lifestaff, folks.
Wow.
You needed the backup plan. You needed to have Sylvok Lifestaff in your deck. Sylvok Lifestaff is a 1 generic mana equipment from Scars of Mirrodin. The equipped creature gets +1/+0, and when the equipped creature is put into a graveyard, you gain 3 life, and it equips for 1. Again, those super cheap numbers, costing 1, equipping for 1. You put it on your Squadron Hawks, you put it on your Stoneforge Mystics, whatever generic expendable creature you have laying around. It was really a great stopgap solution against those red decks, against the vampire decks that were, not super popular, but Paul Rietzel made the top 8 of that Pro Tour with a Boros deck, and
yeah, I mean, Goblin Guide was in this format.
Oh yeah, Goblin Guide was in this format. Everyone was playing plated Geopedes. There was so much aggro to be seen, and you just sometimes Feast and Famine wasn't what you needed. Sometimes you just needed to gain 3 life on the block, and Sylvok Lifestaff fit the bill perfectly.
Sees play in Pauper. I fiddled with a Tortured Existence deck a while back, and this was in the sideboard of one of the lists that I tried. And very real, especially if you're playing, a deck that wants to sacrifice its own creatures or has a way to get things in the graveyard by choice. You can really kind of do broken things with this card.
Yeah, and this is just a great stopgap against aggro, or particularly red. Like, red decks just hate this thing. You get a lightning bolt's worth of life every time the thing dies, and that's a real problem.
It's a real problem, especially for the cost with all the expendable creatures that were in that deck. You're not winning the game with your 1/1s and your 1/2s. Usually you're winning the game either randomly on the back of your 3rd Squadron Hawk with a sword, or with just Jace the Mind Sculptor, better than all. And so having the Sylvok Lifestaff to be able to use that little bit of excess mana, gain a little bit of excess life, get you that little bit of cushion was exactly what the doctor ordered.
Yeah, it was perfect. Aaron, what's number 8?
One of the fun things about making this list was I didn't know just how much equipment was in the Kamigawa sets, Evan. I had no idea. And I didn't know what a lot of things meant. Like, there was the little claws, and like if you do 1 claw, it means something, and 2. And so I spent a lot of time browsing Wikipedia and kind of going down this rabbit hole of seeing what all these things meant. And there was a card that I immediately knew I wanted on my list, but I wanted to know more about it. And so I went to Wikipedia. Come to find out, it is an actual thing. It's also known in English as a 10,000 power chain. And this is really, really awesome. My number 8 is Manriki Gusari.
Nice.
So Manriki is 2 colorless. It's an artifact equipment. It says equipped creature gets +1/+2, and you can tap it to destroy target equipment, and it has an equip cost of 1. So this is a real thing. This is basically a weighted chain. And when you look at the illustration on the card, it lets you just sort of yoink out other pieces of equipment. This sees play in Legacy as an answer to the Stoneforge decks. So when Deathblade is popular, when Stoneforge Mystic is popular. This gives a way to answer opposing Batter Skulls and Jites and swords and things like that. It's currently only going for $1, so it's not that popular, but it's an equipment that answers other equipment. I love the flavor of it, that it's a real thing, and that it exists to just sort of take care of its own, and I think it's really nifty.
I feel like, based on the timing, and this is giving a little something to Wizards, I don't know at the time they're even thinking about it, but Umezawa's Jitte was broken. And this came out in Saviors, whereas Umezawa's Jitte came out in Betrayers. And so people were like, oh man, we found it. This is it. This is the Mirror Breaker. And it really wasn't. Because if they didn't have a Jitte, this thing is crap. And if they did, they're not going to play it now until they deal with your Manriki anyway. So, like, it didn't do what I think they expected it to do, which was hate out certain equipment that was really powerful. So ultimately, it was... like, it did see some amount of play, and it wasn't totally worthless. It was just not as good as I think people envisioned it was. It's like, oh, this is the Jitte killer. It's like, no, it's not. It's
this was literally going to be my number 11 if I had an 11, because I just think that for a top 10 equipment list, it's just the perfect card to talk about. It's equipment that kills other equipment. Whenever it's in a cube, it just brings a smile to my face. It's just people were playing 4 of it for exactly the reason you just said, just as a way to get rid of more Jites. I think that this card, it's also got just gorgeous, hilarious, really evocative, unique art, with the Nuzumi, with that weighted chain you're talking about, Shredder style, or not Shredder style, Splinter style.
Splinter style, yeah.
Yes.
And I think it's great.
Yeah, this is one of those things that, like, and also back in the day when you couldn't afford Jittes, you would just buy Manriki Gusaris.
You still can.
Yeah.
You can still screw them, whatever. Deal with it. All right, moving on here to number 7, and boy, am I glad you brought up Kamigawa.
Like you weren't gonna.
You know I was gonna. It was only
That's
a matter
an evergreen
of time.
tweet. That's just a thing that Evan says when he wakes up in the morning. He just goes, "Oh, I'm glad you brought Kamigawa up."
Because I love it, and they were talking about it recently, and like, Mero was just like, what if we change things? And I'm like, I don't care what you change. You change everything. Give me Japan World. I don't care. It's just so cool. And this is one of the things. This was like, again, I came back in Darksteel. Champions was my first like real big set release, right? And they're going to a brand new world, and it's Japanese world. It's going to be really cool and sweet. And like equipment was still very much a new concept. Like they had broken it because they didn't know what they were doing. They made it too powerful and stuff. But regardless, like it was new and it was different and it was hype. And man, they were kicking butt with Kamigawa in terms of legendary equipment that was really evocative. You could just tell there's a story there, And this one it blew me away from the moment I read it, and I loved it, and it was awesome that it was so cool, and it still got to see standard play. I got to equip this thing to a Yosei. It was amazing. Tatsumasa, the Dragon's Fang, is super cool. It's just one of the coolest cards ever. It's a 6 generic mana, rare legendary equipment. Equipped creature gets +5/+5. 6 generic mana, remove it from the game. Put a 5/5 blue dragon spirit creature token with flying into play. Return Tatsumasa to play under its owner's control when that token is put into a graveyard, and you may equip it for 3 generic mana. So it takes 9 mana to get going, and it takes 6 mana beyond that if you want a dragon. But the sword can turn into a dragon, and that's awesome! That's awesome!
Yeah.
This was on my short list. This was one I had. This would probably be my number 11 if I was allowed to have one. And I'd never seen this before. And I remember I had to read it a couple times of like, do I get a dragon? And then the sword, does it not go, oh my god! Like I just didn't see any downside to it, and it looked amazing.
Oh my god, it was so much fun. And I played this in like a generic, like a crazy big go wild, like green white monster mana stuff. And I was playing dragons with this and getting dragons with it. And man,
this card is no joke, man. I mean, it is a recursive threat.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of insane.
Like, you have to exile the token, otherwise you're going to see it again, and that's a problem.
Just pay 6 mana, make a 5/5 every single time.
Let me put it this way. The reason that I love Kamigawa so much is exactly, like, right here. Like, there's other examples I can show you, but, like, how cool is this? You're not going to get this anywhere else.
Of this story is fascinating to me as well. Like, this is sort of the... what's the sword maker's name from Kill Bill?
Oh, yeah, I can't think of the name.
Yeah, anyway, Hattori Hanzo.
Yeah.
This is sort of like a Hattori Hanzo sword, where somebody came in and demanded a sword and Tatsumasa's maker was like, I think that's a bad idea. And then the guy was just stormed off in a rage, and then the maker still made it, but then like made it a cursed blade, and then whoever ordered it was sort of cursed by this blade forever and was haunted by this dragon. And you've never even heard that story before, because the lore of Kamigawa is so deep and thick with these little one-off side quests like Tatsumasa the Dragon's Fang, that even something as fascinating and as unique, that could be a whole story, that could be a whole episode of Avatar The Last Airbender by itself. And it's just like, so it's just on one card. Beyond the fact that this card is also just great. I mean, I'm not sure I've lost a game where I've had a Tatsumasa in play. Now, to be fair, I think I've only had Tatsumasa in play during like limited and casual, so I'm not sure how competitive it is, but certainly a great card, super evocative, super neat.
Untapping with this card feels real good. Oh boy. Aaron, what's your number 7?
I've talked a lot about my local EDH group who really made me love playing EDH again. And one of the people in my pod is a young lady named Christina. Hi, Christina, if you're watching. And Christina is lovingly known as sort of our bargain girl. She hates spending money on cards. Most of her EDH decks are built with cards she has laying around at home. And a lot of them are standard legal. And sometimes we'll poke fun at her because we'll be like, girl, is that a Trumocratus? And she's like, don't, it's what I had. Like, don't do that. And so this, my number 7 was one of the cards that she had debuted one day. And if I remember correctly, she debuted it in like a deck that I didn't really know what the card did. Like, it was a standard card that I kind of scoffed at the time. And I gained a new respect for this card seeing her use it, because I realized that the card doesn't just work in green decks, it works with any deck. And come to find out since then, it really is an EDH staple. It goes for about $2.50 right now. And I know so many decks that never leave home without it, and I have a new appreciation for it. So thank you, Christina. My number 7, Sword of the Animist. So Sword of the Animist is 2 colorless legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1, and whenever equipped creature attacks, you may search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, shuffle your library equipped 2. I thought this was only forests. Like, I saw Nissa and I saw the green beam, and I never bothered to read the card, and so I just assumed it only got forests. And so she shows up with a blue deck, and I'm like, girl.
Yeah.
What you doing? And she's like, didn't you read the card? I'm like, no, why would I read the card? It's a Sword of the Animist. And come to find out, it's actually really, really good. And so a large number of EDH decks have this card. I've since started playing it myself. But, you know, if it weren't for my friend and her crazy way of building decks and me not knowing how to read cards, I probably wouldn't know this card and respect it the way that I do now.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, Sword of the Animist itself, when it showed up in Magic Origins, I was just like, wow, this card seems incredibly strong. Like, you just attack and you go get the rampant growth or whatever over and over.
Yeah.
Like, even if it wasn't strong in standard, it's always going to be playable in limited in literally any EDH deck. It was just, Absolutely. To me, it was like a big loud signal of like, this is an awesome commander card. This card is nuts. And it did see a little bit of standard play. Like, an effect like this was too good to ignore ultimately. But, yeah. But Sword of the Animist, again, awesome reprint in Commander 2017, and also Arch Enemy Nicol Bolas. Get you a copy of this card, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Card's really, really, really powerful, especially once it gets out of hand. A little bit too expensive to start seeing real competitive play in the constructed formats, but yeah, the effect is no joke.
Like, you give me landfall triggers, yeah.
Oh man, yeah, infinite landfall triggers, and again, if the equipment or I think the cost was 1 mana less on either half, this could have been an issue. All right, Ruben, do you have a number 7?
I do.
Awesome.
My number 7, again, won a Pro Tour. Lesser known Pro Tour piece, I guess you would say. David Sharfman won Pro Tour Nagoya in 2011. He had a lot of pieces of equipment in his White Weenie Paladin mix-up kind of deck. This was the Glint Hawk Idol, Hero of Bladehold, White Weenie aggro situation.
Loved it.
Yeah, I mean, the deck is great.
It was so cool.
But it was not. It's not a central piece of just one archetype. It saw play across lots of different archetypes, across lots of different Pro Tours. It was even in some of those Kago decks that I referenced earlier. It was in Blue-White Delver. It made an appearance in at least one other Pro Tour in the hands of Lucas Blohan as the other pod in his Birthing Pod deck. And obviously it was a great combo alongside many of the recursive zombies. Aaron, for example, Gravecrawler, seeing as it comes back from the dead over and over again, and you could just machine gun people with your Mortar Pod. Mortar Pod is my next choice. It is my number 7. So Mortar Pod is 2 colorless mana artifact equipment, and it's our first living weapon, I believe.
Ooh.
Living weapon is an ability that says when this equipment enters the battlefield, you create a 0/0 black germ creature token, and then attach it to this. Originally from Mirrodin Besieged, this particular living weapon says that equipped creature gets +0/+1 and has the ability sacrifice this creature : this creature deals 1 damage to any target, and it equips for 2. Just good value. You don't need any particular combo to go with it. It was in that David Sharfman deck, obviously, and didn't really have any combos other than it was just an efficient equipment that drew you a card with Pure Steel Paladin. You played it in your Blue-White Delver decks just as, ping damage and chip damage in there. Your Neopod deck to get your extra sacrifice triggers. Certainly where it's shown, I think, most was the zombie decks and the decks that could really take advantage of using multiple deaths over and over and over again. Cards like Gravecrawler, Geralf's Messenger. It was just a great sacrifice outlet, as Sam Black is wont to do. He basically says if a card says sacrifice a creature : the rest of the ability doesn't matter. Like he would rather it not say anything else than have the rest of the text. And so this card did that. It's just a great card. I've seen it in multiple cubes. It's always surprising. It doesn't look that impressive, honestly.
No.
It's really under the radar every time you play it, but every time it's on the battlefield, it just changes the combat math. It changes the life total math. I love this card, and I think it's great.
Yeah, Black Red Zombies was a great deck back in the day. I was still coming back to Magic, so I regret not playing this deck, because looking back on it as something I absolutely would have played. It was the deck with the Falcon Wrath Aristocrats and the Brimstone Volleys and getting the Morbid triggers for Tragic Slip and things like that, choosing when to get those triggers and things like Geralf's Messenger. And yeah, this is definitely one of those cards that, you look at it, like you said, it looks very innocuous, but it was a very important piece of a tier 1 deck. Yeah.
It just kind of freaks me out that it makes a 0/0 and then it attaches something like state-based effects.
Yeah.
Like state-based
Yeah, art's
effects.
a little creepy too. It's like a bug. But
they could have been 1/1s. You could have adjusted things and made them 1/1s. It's fine.
Man, it's already good enough. You don't need it to.
Well, you could also have draw a card on it. You can do a lot of things.
Yeah.
No.
Sure. Could do all the things.
Sacrifice this creature : is just a beautiful phrase.
I love. Yeah. There are a couple of phrases in Magic where I just register certain people. Like Adam Prozac is famous for saying that he would rather loot than draw a card. He would rather draw and discard than just draw a card. I'm not sure if that's true anymore, but he certainly went on the record saying it. Sam Black, obviously, with this quote about if it says he said this in response to when Veral's The Scar Striped was previewed in the previous Return to Ravnica. It says sacrifice a creature : I'm done. I'm already sold. I don't care what the rest of the ability is. And Mortar Pod has that beautiful, beautiful, simple line of text.
Oh, yeah. All right. So let's move on here to number 6. I don't have one. Ruben, do you have one?
No. It's higher. I had to check just to make sure.
Hey, Aaron, you got a number 6?
I do. I'm not a deck builder. I'm not a brewer, and I'm not ashamed to say that if I play an EDH deck, it's probably a net deck, because I just appreciate the work that people have put in, and it's just something I just can't do. And so when Queen Marchesa was revealed, I knew that I wanted a Queen Marchesa deck, but I wasn't sure which direction I wanted to go. And there was one deck I was eyeing, which I'm actually playing right now, thanks to Saffron Olive, which is more of a Pillow 40 style deck. You kind of just want to be left alone with your kingdom, and occasionally you might chime into the game. But there was another version that I found courtesy of, I think, Commanderin. I think they were the guys who came up with this other version, and it really leaned on turning Marchesa into almost a machine gun, kind of like you mentioned earlier with the Cunning Spark Mage. Her being a death touch creature, if you put something on her that can just constantly ping things, she can just sort of sit from atop her tower. She doesn't really have to get involved with anything, but she can just from above just pew 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 and kind of deal with her rivals. And I ended up not going with that version, but if I would have leaned very heavily on my number 6, which is Thornbite Staff. So Thornbite Staff is 2 colorless. It's a tribal artifact shaman equipment, which is interesting.
Wow.
I know, right? Equipped creature has 2 colorless and tap. This creature deals 1 damage to target creature or player. And whenever a creature is put into a graveyard from play, untap this creature. It also says whenever a shaman creature comes into play, you may attach Thornbite Staff to it, and it costs 4 to equip. So if you give this to a Death Touch creature, it's just always going to untap. So you can literally just clear the board, just pew, 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 have your Death Toucher be the only thing out there. And this card is really, really scary. And, if I decided to go that way, that could have been a very good time. But yeah, I had never heard of this card before when I saw it. And when the light bulb went off of, it's just going to untap because I'm going to kill everything.
See, like, it's fun because the commander player is like, I'm going to be able to kill everything. And the spike player is just like, my God, you're paying how much mana for all this?
Yeah.
You're going to pay like 8 mana before you do anything. Jeez. The commander players are like, whatever, who cares, man? A Soul Ring turn 1, go. I mean, like, it's crazy. That is the ultimate card for that type of deck. And I think that is beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on here to number 5 as we breeze through number 6. I have a number 5. I'm fairly confident. I believe this is Ruben's number 6. I'm just going to call it right now because this is a classic card. This is one of those cards that when I came back into Magic made me fall in love with Magic all over again. And Wizards now regrets the template that they have created, and a cycle, if you will, a cycle that they then completed over time once we went back to it in Scars of Mirrodin and stuff. And the swords in Mirrodin were just amazing, and they started off in Darksteel, and easily one of the coolest. Mark Zug just destroyed it with his image of Sword of Fire and Ice. Ruben, did I call it?
You did not.
Oh, man.
I actually do not have this one in my top 10.
Wow.
Sword of Fire and Ice is amazing. This card
is
a 3 generic mana, rare equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from red and from blue. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, Sword of Fire and Ice deals 2 damage to any target, and you draw a card. That is amazing. And if you don't know that's amazing, you should play with this card, and you'd be like, oh my God, that's amazing. That's actually incredible. I feel better about my life now. This is a card that makes you just feel good inside. It does everything great. It draws cards. It has protection from 2 of the most annoying colors in terms of things that target things.
Popular.
To bounce it and, destroy it or whatever. It's just, it filled that exact niche. And there were other swords, particularly like, Light and Shadow. No. Fire and Ice was always sweet. Even to this day, I see it peppered about every once in a while. Just a little bit random.
Well, it's actually the only one that still sees play in Legacy. It's the only sword still putting up top 8s because it sees play.
Main deckable even.
Wow.
Yeah, main deckable in Death and Taxes. Sometimes you'll even see it in Maverick whenever that deck rears its ugly head. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's colorless card advantage in those decks that have a difficult time doing it. Provides 2, at least 1 relevant damage prevention type. In the protection from red, giving you a good bolt protection. Mm-hmm. The blue, obviously, relevant for the bounce from Jace and getting chump blocked by errant true name nemesis and things like that. The Sword of Fire and Ice, certainly the headliner of the original swords. And all 5 of the now completed Super Cycle are great. Sword of Fire and Ice might be the most impressive one. It was the original Grand Prix Las Vegas playmat when they had the very first Modern Masters Grand Prix. I think that it's the most poetic of the swords. I think it's the most...
that Chris Ron art from Modern Masters was just...
spectacular.
It was just amazing.
Yeah, it was just absolutely gorgeous.
Right.
One of my great things I've done is that once I figured out that there were the 5 swords and there were 10 different damage types in Dungeons and Dragons, I created 5 legendary weapons that each of the legendary weapons granted you protection from certain types of damage. And so I was very proud of myself that I could make a Sword of Fire and Ice that gave you protection or resistance to fire and cold damage, and all the other ones, of course. Nice. It was tougher to sort of align which ones go with which for some of the swords, but Fire and Ice was an easy one.
My God.
In terms of...
This card is like $60.
Yeah, it's still incredibly potent in every format that it's legal. It will occasionally pop up in modern, although equipment decks aren't really super equipment based right now. Every time it was in standard, very popular in the Goblin decks during the day.
Oh yeah.
As another card advantage engine, and of course, like I mentioned, Death and Taxes, Sword of Fire and Ice is a major part.
Wow. All right, Ruben, what's number 5?
My number 5
is
also higher on someone else's list.
Okay. Aaron, what's your number 5?
Well, speaking of my Queen March has a list, my number 5 features prominently in it. Innistrad Block was our first taste of the transform mechanic, with creatures like Huntmaster of the Fells and things of that nature. And since then, they've really played around with that design space. We have the new Nicol Bolas, which is a flipping planeswalker. We had the Magic Origins planeswalkers. We have lands now that transform into other things, enchantments that turn into lands. We've really played around with that space, and I really love that. But to my knowledge, this is the only equipment this was the first equipment to flip and to really give us that. And now we have things like the treasure maps and the prying blades and things like that. But to my knowledge, this was the first equipment that let you flip. And it's very, very expensive. But if God forbid it works, you are doing amazing jaw-dropping things. My number 5 is Elbrus the Binding Blade.
Mm-hmm.
So Elbrus is 7 colorless, legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+0, so not very much. But if equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, unattach Elbrus, then transform it into Withengar Unbound, which is a flying, intimidate, trample 13/13. Am I reading that correctly? And then whenever a player loses the game, put 13 +1/+1 counters on Withengar Unbound. Eric Deschamps just killing both sides of this art. And I can't tell you how many times I've attached this to like a Lingering Souls token and be like, anybody got flyers? Anyone got flyers? Whoop! And then suddenly I have a 13/13 and game on. And I really, really love this card. Obviously, in Commander, somebody's bound to be open. You're bound to have a creature with some sort of evasion effect on board. And just all you need to do is just hit once, and suddenly there's a very, very scary threat on board. And so I love this card. And just, it was really one of the first.
It was the first, yeah.
I mean, this is one of those I would describe sort of as a story card, and like it's made to create stories that you talk about later, right? Like, and then I flipped the Binding Blade, and oh my god, it's like that's the type of stuff that you get to say because it was priced right out of constructed, and they didn't want it constructed, so they gave it a nice high cost because once you have it in play, it just creates all these amazing stories, and you have all this fun with it.
Yeah. I've never brought myself to the point where I went, you know what, I'm going to pay 7 mana for a bone saw and then like feel good about it. You know what I mean? Like even if there's a 13/13 on the back, that's just not where I want to be living.
Who the not Commander players are on this podcast.
Right. But the card itself tells a great story. It obviously was it was the artifact equipment representative in From the Vault Transform. Being only one of 3 transforming artifacts, one being Elbrus, another one being the recently printed Dowsing Dagger. And I will give you $1 if you can name the last one without looking.
Dang, I knew Dowsing Dagger.
It's the Prying Blade, isn't it?
It's what?
The Prying Blade from the Rivals? No.
Prying Blade makes treasure tokens.
Oh, okay. I thought it flipped.
The last one is an uncommon from Shadows over Innistrad named Neglected Heirloom.
Oh, yeah.
Transforms into the Ashmouth Blade, which I'm reading it and I couldn't, if I looked away, I couldn't tell you what it did. It is a hell of a thing.
Wow.
But yeah, Elbrus is a great choice. I love it.
Fair enough. All right, so let's move on here to number 4. Pretty sure.
Well, Erin is original, so she doesn't have any sames or any hires.
I don't.
So, Evan, I think that it's me and you and me every time we roll the dice.
Yes.
So.
Casually. And we have an incredible number 4, and I love the fact that, again, this is number 4. We randomly share number 4. 260 options, say number 4. And this one is cool because, first of all, it was one of my previews back in the day. This was my preview for Mirrodin.
I remember that.
And and I was just like, wow, this card looks really good. And I didn't really hear. I sort of from the grapevine. I basically heard that they didn't know how good this card was when they gave it to me, or they would have given it to somebody else to preview.
Right.
I don't know if that was the exact story, but whatever. The idea essentially was that they started bringing the swords back. We just talked about the swords, how incredible the swords were. They were huge to bring back. Oh my God, the swords were nuts. And I got a sword. I got a sword from Mirrodin Besieged. It was not like, oh my God, Sword of Feast and Famine is amazing.
Yeah.
Literally created Callblade. I was there in Paris when they sat there and they named that deck Callblade. Sword of Feast and Famine.
This is the blade of Callblade.
Yes, it is 3 generic mana. It is a mythic equipment from Mirrodin Besieged. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from black and from green. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card and you untap all lands you control. And as with all swords, they equip for 2 generic mana. This ability is nuts. Now the ability looks good, and if you've never played this card or you haven't seen it in play or whatever, you're like, okay, they're discarding and you get a thing or whatever.
It looks good. It plays amazing. Like, untap all lands you control is a ludicrous line of text to put on any Magic card. We were just talking the other day about Bear Umbra and how that card is $1 zillion for no particular discernible reason. And boy, let me tell you, Bear Umbra is no Sword of Feast and Famine.
No, when you had the perfect creature, which was Squadron Hawk, which could fly over whatever, to carry this one and hit them, the original, and this came from Zach Hill, the original design made them discard at random, which would have been completely insane. Basically, untapping all your lands is very close to taking an extra turn. It's not taking an extra turn, but it's basically...
It's very close.
You have a whole turn's worth of mana back at your disposal to do whatever you want with, such as the 5 mana it took to play and equip this card. So now you can play another 5-drop, like Thragtusk or whatever you want to do, or some other planeswalker like Gideon Jura.
Squadron Hawk and leave up Mana Leak, or leave up your removal spells, or a Divine Offering for your opponent's Sword of Feast and Famine. This is the tempoiest equipment. It removed your options from your opponent. You were terrified every time your opponent was going into turn 5 whenever you were any deck that didn't have a way to deal with it the turn that it came onto the battlefield. It was just a force to be reckoned with throughout its life cycle in Standard. Weirdly, though, not weirdly because it lived in a world with Stoneforge Mystic, but there were 5 decks that ran it at Pro Tour Paris and 5 copies in the top 8 because all you needed was the 5 because Little Miss Stoneforge was all that you needed to be able to go get it. The Cargo deck, of course, being the most impressive iteration with Sword of Feast and Famine, but it saw play in Red-White Control and Bant Aggro. Eduardo Sarjalic put up another Pro Tour top 8 in Modern, actually, at Pro Tour Return to Ravnica in his blue-white sort of tempo, Restoration Angel, Flash-ish kind of deck with the deck as well, or with the card as well. But yeah, it's just a solid equipment. It does everything you want. Probably the best sword for its time. It's arguable with sort of Fire and Ice because of eternal considerations, but yeah, just a spectacularly good card.
With just one of the worst promos I've ever seen.
I was just gonna say, we were talking about all the good that goes with Sword. Boy, does it have gorgeous original art by Chris Ron. It has gorgeous Kaladesh Invention art by Steve Belladin. This weird. I don't know what this thing is. Like I
have an issue with the art director. The art director.
I'm sorry, Ephraim Palacios. I'm sure you're a very nice man, but this is not my favorite.
I love you, Ephraim. It's fine.
It's cool, but this is not a sword. It's not a sword. That's the whole
Ephraim
point.
is a great artist. He's done stuff like he's done, like we referenced earlier, Lead the Stampede, for example. He's done some excellent work in the past. This is not. Yeah, I definitely blame the art director for this choice.
Again, at the time, I saw it, I started flipping out, and everyone was just like, "It was wrong." I was like, "Not a sword. Look up definition of sword. Not a sword. This is it's just it's
like a nunchuck of Feast and Famine."
The idea that they lose a card and you get a turn's worth of mana, that's worth it.
Yeah.
That turns out to be one of the best cards in the format. All right. So Ruben and I have shared our number 4. Aaron, what is yours?
One of the core concepts of equipment is it needs to be attached to something to really work. And there are a couple of exceptions, which I'm sure we'll talk about because they're insanely powerful. But typically, equipment needs to be on something to really do its job. And this was the first piece of equipment that I ever saw. I wasn't around for Kamigawa and things of that nature. So this was the first thing that I ever saw that really didn't need another creature to do its thing. And I thought it really occupied a neat space in terms of what you could do when you don't even need a creature to make equipment work. This saw a little bit of play in Standard as a control finisher. Control decks who either don't run creatures or run very few creatures were able to use this as sort of an evasive creature to really get in there and try to close the games out. My number 4 is Haunted Plate Mail. So Haunted Plate Mail costs 4 colorless. It's an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +4/+4. You can pay 0, and until end of turn, Haunted Plate Mail becomes a 4/4 spirit artifact creature that's no longer an equipment. Activate this ability only if you control no creatures, or you can just pay 4 colorless and equip it. So again, this is sort of one of those flavorful, how many times have you seen a scary movie and the armor animates itself and there's a spirit inside of it and it goes after the Scooby Kids or whatever. This is that. This was in Magic 2014. And so if you're playing a control deck and you have a creature, great, make it an 8/8, make it a 7/7, whatever. But if you don't, here's just a really evasive 4/4 that unless you have instant speed removal, you're not going to have a way to deal with. And when the turn is over, it just reverts back to being, that suit of armor that you can't really deal with unless you have artifact removal now. And so this was a card that I really hoped would have seen more play. Unfortunately, it didn't. But whenever I did see it, I was always really happy to see it. And I think I might have opened it at the pre-release. But love this, love the space that it occupies, and it just had to be on my list.
Yeah, it was in 2014 and 2015.
Oh, okay.
And this card is an absolute freaking house in Limited. Oh my God. I either have a 4/4 or my best creature gets +4/+4. Like, oh snap. Yeah, this card ended games. It was very, very powerful. And I always loved it. It just just a few numbers. It's how it always works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, very similar in a lot of ways to your Tatsumasa pick earlier, where it's just this sort of unkillable threat. This one, of course, being a little bit smaller, but much lower to the ground in terms of mana cost. Really scary and limited. I don't think I would ever pass one of these in my entire life if given the opportunity. Really cool story as well. Harkens back to the classic fantasy animated armor. Love this card.
All right. Well, according to the rules of deduction, I know what Ruben's number 2 and number 1 are.
Wow.
As we move on here to number 3, because I don't have one because it's higher on someone else's list. Ruben, do you have a number 3?
I do.
All right.
I'm a little surprised that I have number 3 all to myself.
You might
I'm not shocked. I guess that it's what?
I still have hires that have yet to be.
No, I know.
Shared.
I'm just. I think that it's a little interesting that I have this one so high on my list. It's all by itself, all by its lonesome. We tied with the Sword of Feast and Famine, for example. And yet somehow I have Batterskull all by my lonesome here at number 3. Batterskull, I mean, what do I really need to tell you what it does? Because I feel like it's
I try to forget, but I'm not allowed to.
Right. I feel like it's the equipment that if you have ever played Legacy, you know what Batterskull does. But you know what? I'll refresh your memory. Batterskull is a 5-mana equipment. It's a mythic rare originally from New Phyrexia, then got a Grand Prix promo. It has Living Weapon. Apparently, I'm the Living Weapon representative here on the podcast.
Clearly.
So that when this equipment enters the battlefield, you put a 0/0 black germ creature token onto the battlefield and then attach it to this. Or if you're Evan, you make a 1/1 that draws you a card and gains 8 life. Or
whatever. It's fine. Same difference.
The 0/0 or whatever equipped creature gets +4/+4 and has Vigilance and Lifelink. Mm-hmm. So just for retail, you get a 4 lifelink.
Why?
Oh my God.
I'm not done yet. Pay 3 mana, return Batterskull to its owner's hand.
Jesus.
And it equips for 5. No. So, I mean, you want to talk about a clock that also just changes the whole combat math. It like whenever a Batterskull hits, it just turns the game around in your favor. This was the card that made Esper Blade or Bant Blade, all of those legacy decks that were surrounding Stoneforge Mystic and Legacy. This is one of the equipments. This is really the equipment that you go get with your Stoneforge Mystic in those Eternal formats. I was just going to. Sorry, I apologize.
No,
According to our According to our good close personal friend Niza Hone of the Aether Hub, this is the number one equipment of all time, according to the stats, with the total top eights, total GPs, total overall score, the way that he does it with his mathematical breakdown of things based on all of those finishes in Legacy and Modern. Don't forget that this is actually a powerhouse in those Blue Moon decks. You see it in Urzatron, all over the place. Death and Taxes, the Skred Red decks. You see it in Eldrazi and Eldrazi Tron. Amulet Titan runs it as another way to sort of bolster its life total. The Stoneblade and the Deathblade decks, obviously. This card is just all over the place. Not to mention sideboards in places where you wouldn't necessarily expect it. Things like Jeskai aggro decks. Generic green-white mid-range kind of things. It's just all over the place, and I think that it's well deserving of a high spot.
This is the card that people point to whenever the discussion turns to unbanning Stoneforge in Modern, because GT is banned, and GT is usually it's a toss-up between this and GT as to what you get first. And so you can't get GT in Modern, but you can get a Batterskull. And so anytime the conversation goes, is Stoneforge safe to unban, people always say, well, you can't have a turn 3 Batterskull, or you can't have a whatever. And it's like, and that's the excuse that people use for why we can't have Stoneforge in Modern. But I think it's fine. Also important to note that if you ever bounce it, you can sacrifice the token and exile someone's bridge from below. So if you really want to rain out a dredge player's day, that's the way to do it.
Important to note, there's your Tales from the Crypt hint for the day. If you want to exile bridges, just bounce a Batterskull.
Yeah, but card is obnoxious, and it took me a while to figure out what it was. Like, I actually didn't know what it was until the promo art came out, where it's a skull that you can sit in and like ride, and like what?
Whee! I mean, this was my number 6. This went directly below Sword of Feast and Famine and Sword of Fire and Ice. And there's no doubt about it. New Phyrexia, for those who hadn't been around that long, leaked badly. And this was the God Book leak. This was the everything. You got the PDF with literally every card in it. Was spoiled in the right before spoiler season was started. They showed you not the Phyrexian Negator, the 4 mana, 4 black, 5/5
Obliterator.
Yes,
Phyrexian Obliterator.
Phyrexian Obliterator. Thank you. They showed us Obliterator, but we had not seen Dismember. And we sure as hell had not seen Batterskull. Oh my God. Like, this was great, because this was the time period in which I visited Wizards multiple times, and I got to interview the R&D guys a whole bunch of times and talk to them about it. And, I was talking to the R&D guys, and they're just like, well, it's, this is your payoff. This is your ultimate payoff of Blue. And I'm like, yeah, why did you do this? Everything is insane about this card. And my favorite part is that the hidden bonus on this card is equip 5. Everyone forgets about the equipping, and you're like, I'll stick this on my whatever, my Vendilion click, and you're like, what?
My Stoneforge Mist is going to attack you with a 5/6. Why not?
I can't block that. That's insane. Yeah, so that is the hidden mode on this card that everyone forgets about.
By the way, pay 5 and attack you with a Squadron Hawk that's now, Baneslayer Angel sized.
Yeah, it also has vigilance, because reasons, right?
By the way,
it's so good. It's always good. It's always powerful. This is the card that...
we were already in an era where Caw-Blade was great.
Oh yeah. It did not need this.
And then they gave us Batterskull.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was gratuitous, how bad. We'll talk about a card that's very similar to Batterskull here shortly. And I know that.
I have a very personal connection with the card Batterskull, because when I first joined the podcast already in progress, the In Contention podcast, Matt Cranstuber and Sam Stoddard were the 2 curators and hosts of that show at the time. And as I joined on, they were making some T-shirts. They were making some fan art for the In Contention podcast. And their art was them essentially in a fast food kitchen. With the hats and the baskets in the back of a fast food kitchen, and they were battering skulls, and that was their sort of motif.
Jesus.
And as I joined on, they were like, well, how do we get Ruben in here? And I got the little employee of the month, Ruben, in the background up on. So the very first piece of merch that I ever appeared on was an In Contention T-shirt. I'm sure I have my In Contention T-shirt somewhere, or I throw it out, but someone somewhere has an
whatever. Who cares about memories, right? Screw those guys.
Employee of the month, Ruben Bressler, with the deep fried battered skulls.
This card is just not fair. It's not fair. It's undercosted on everything it does, and I swear to God, when you get to the return it to your hand, you're like, Wizards, you're killing me. Aaron, what's your number 3?
You need to sit down.
I have a great story about this card from the other day at GP Minneapolis. This is my pick for the sleeper hit of Dominaria. Dominaria was chock full of hits. We had the Mox Amber, we had Joyra, we had Karn Scion of Urza, we had Teferi, whatever he does. I don't pay 5 mana for blue and white cards. I just don't. But there were a lot of cool cards in Dominaria, and I feel like this card kind of slipped under the radar. And until people started using it, until people started seeing it in action. And I talked before about how equipment it typically has to be on a creature, and usually it doesn't matter like how good the creature is. But I feel like in particular with this card, it really doesn't matter how good the creature is, because when you're just getting multiple copies of a creature, you're just forming an army, and it really doesn't matter what it does. I remember when I was playing in the pre-release, there was the little skitterer, the thing with the telescope, which is pretty innocuous by itself. But when you're facing down 10 of them, you've got a problem. My number 3 is Helm of the Host. So Helm of the Host is 4 colorless, which is legendary artifact equipment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a token that's a copy of equipped creature, except the token isn't legendary if equipped creature is legendary. That token gains haste. Equip 5. Very important to note, those tokens don't go away. Nope. So when you've got 11 skitterers coming at you, goodbye. The other day, I was playing Commander. I was playing my Muldrotha list, and I had used In Bolus's Clutches to steal opponent number 1's Helm of the Host. I then used Animate Dead to steal opponent number 2's Elishnorn. And I have 3 Elishnorns on the board.
Wow.
You haven't lived until you've had 3 Elishnorns on the board, because this takes away the legendary clause. So whoop, whoop, whoop. -6 to everything? Sure. And this card just feels amazing. The art is spectacularly creepy. Shout out to Igor Kirlik, who does creepy very, very well. This is a callback to things like Flowstone and Vesuva, things who've been playing, words that people who've been playing for a while will recognize. But this card is just ridiculous, and it doesn't even matter what you put it on, because eventually you're just going to have so many of a thing, and multiple copies of a thing is almost always a bad scene.
Yeah, this was my number 9. Like
good.
There is no doubt this is one of the top cards you want to open in your sealed pool in draft. This card is unstoppable. If you equip it to a Llanowar elf, you're probably losing. Well, if you equip it, you're probably winning. If they equip it, it just doesn't matter, because you're just like, it's just a 1/1. Well, 4 turns later, you're like, what happened to my life here? Right. And if they drew anything better, you're just dead. This card is amazing, and it was an all-star in Limited, and I've played a lot of Dominaria Limited, and I just loved it. This is the type of card that makes you main deck Artifact and Enchantment Hate in every Dominaria Limited deck. You needed it there, because stuff like this will destroy you.
Absolutely. It's a really evocative piece of flavor, in addition to being just like a super powerful super bomb. And also is, I think, probably going to maintain its value. Of all the Dominaria rares and mythics, this one is the one you want to put in a closet and forget about for about 5 years, because these will keep their value.
Yeah, it's only about $2 now, so get them. Get them now.
This is one of those, like, people listen to the cast 3 years from now and they're like, $2? I wish I could get it for $2, you know, like that type of thing, because this card is sweet. So and it's not going to stop. Let's move on here to number 2. I don't have one because it's Ruben's number 1. And
I don't have a number 2 because it's Evan's number 1.
It's weird. Stuck in the middle with us. Hey, Aaron, what's your number 2?
Okay, I got this. Cool. So my Affinity and even Shops decks, to a certain extent, are full of not very good creatures. Like, when you look at them by themselves, particularly Affinity, but we can talk about Shops later, you look at Affinity in a vacuum and you're like, Ornithopter, Memnite, like nothing, Vault Scourge. That's cute, girl. Like, you know, you see Affinity sneeze out their hand, and usually they'll do their thing, and you're like, this is fine, this is fine, this is fine, pass the turn. And then they pass the turn, and then it comes back to them, and then they play this card, and all of those creatures suddenly look terrifying. Also, the ability to put a equipment on something at instant speed is very rare. That's normally a sorcery speed thing you have to do. But this equipment gives you the ability to do it at instant speed, so depending on how you block, they can react to it and just make something ungodly big very, very quickly. This card gets out of hand incredibly quickly. How is this a common? How? This also sees play in Pauper. I have lots of questions regarding this card. My number 2 is Cranial Plating. Cranial Plating costs 2 colorless artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control. That includes lands, it includes creatures, it includes just whatever. Very quickly gets out of hand. You can pay 2 black to attach it to a target creature you control at instant speed. Why? Or you could just pay one lone colorless. And so it's not unusual for Affinity to be able to make black mana. It's also not unusual for them to have lots of artifacts, and this is very, very cheap. This gets very, very scary. This allows them to win out of nowhere, essentially. Put this on an Ink Moth Nexus. There's your Infect. There's 10 Infect right there. Deal with that. This is the card that makes Affinity scary. If you were to ever ban this card, not that I'm saying they should, Affinity probably wouldn't be a big deal. But this is the card that turns the tide from a bunch of crummy artifact creatures you don't care about to, uh-oh.
I mean, let's go back, okay? Let's round back to 2004 or whatever it was. And Affinity was everywhere. It was demolishing people. It was destroying lives. It was wrecking the standard format. People were quitting Magic in droves. They ain't quit Magic like that. They won't quit Magic like that for another 10 years. Like, it was ridiculous. And then Wizards is like, hey, we got this new set. Check out cranial plating. And it was the most tone deaf, awkward, ugly, like you're just like, do you know what hell you hath wrought? They already play black. Did you really want? I mean, you could play with the artifact lands. Every mana you had was a +1/+0 to this. Like, it just. I'm telling you, it did not go over well. It did not. It was ugly. And for God's sakes, Wizards, what did you do?
Yeah. I have no idea how there was only one copy of Affinity in the top 8 of Pro Tour Columbus in 2004, but by God, there was only one copy, and it won that tournament in the hands of Pierre Canali.
Nice.
And yeah, cranial plating has had a hell of a lifespan, mostly in Affinity X decks across all formats, from standard to modern, extended, what have you. And I guess they just didn't figure it out in R&D.
No, absolutely not. Like, there was a classic story of when they were something like the day Darksteel previews or something were coming out, or thereabouts. They, like, somebody said in the office, "Hey, we should try Arcbound Ravager in Affinity," and they'd never done that. And yeah. So when you don't,
well, the hilarious thing about Ravager is that it's actually kind of a nombo with the cranial plating. Yeah. But you know what? If one of them kills you, it doesn't matter if the other one's losing value. But they definitely didn't figure this one out because it was actually a part of a cycle. This was the black equip part of a cycle that also included Notable Chaff, Healer's Headdress, Horned Helm, Nurok Stealth Suit, and Sparring Collar.
Yes.
Wow.
Those are not cards you will ever see, ever. But cranial plating, to this day, just an extremely potent, powerful.
You're going to feel real dumb when Saffron Olive watches this and makes like a 5-color equip video to do you wrong.
Oh my God.
He's going to get me good with those Nurok stealth suits.
This was my number 3. I do feel this is one of the most important pieces of equipment ever made.
Absolutely.
Not in a good way. Just in
a
right. Just in a way that you need to be aware, like, sort of historically, like, how bad did they mess up? My God, it was
when
ugly.
Synergy goes wrong, you get Affinity.
Oh my God, you certainly do. All right, so we're going to move on here to our number 1, of which we all have one, which is great. Ruben, have we covered your number 6 yet?
No.
I see. So because you haven't covered my number 10, which I'm pretty sure means it's Aaron's number 1. Aaron, what is your number 1?
So the running theme throughout my list has been EDH, and EDH has really kind of exposed me to the world of equipment, which I otherwise wouldn't have been exposed to. And when you play EDH for a long time or pretty regularly, you understand that there's a list of staples that you never leave home without, and you might as well just buy like 3 or 4 copies. I know when I first started playing EDH, I was like, I'm just gonna buy one and like swap them, like it's gonna be fine. No, go ahead and buy 4 copies. You're going to need them. You got your soul rings, you've got your clue stones, your keystones, your key runes, whatever. And this is another card that you absolutely don't want to leave home without. Ruben, you gave a shout out to EDH Rec earlier. I'm going to go ahead and piggyback off of that. According to EDH Rec, there are 85,392 decks that are running a copy of this card. And I can easily see why I've bought so many copies. And just when I think I don't need any more, I build another commander deck and go ahead and buy one. My number 1's Lightning Greaves. So Lightning Greaves started off in Mirrodin. It's an artifact equipment for 2 colorless. Equipped creature has haste and can't be the target of spells or abilities, or if you're playing the Oracle text game, it says that this creature has haste and shroud. An equip cost of 0. So this is a little bit better than the lightning boots or the swift boots.
Swiftfoot boots.
Yeah, a little more.
I am anticipating Swiftfoot boots making an appearance in our comments section this coming week.
Yeah, maybe, but this is, if you have a choice, I usually choose this one because the 0 equipped is much more efficient. But yeah, if you're playing any sort of commander deck and it's very important for your commander to be protected, this is the card that you want. It's going for $5 right now. It's been reprinted several times. In fact, we have there was even a masterpiece version in Kaladesh. So we have Arch Enemy, Commander 2011, Commander 2015, Commander 2016, Commander 2017. Just at least a dozen reprints, and still going for at least $5. So definitely maintains its value. It's definitely something you want in a commander deck. I don't know anybody who doesn't want to protect their commander, and if you do, this is the card that you want.
So Rosewater has a great story about Lightning Greaves, which again is my number 10, Ruben's number 6. Is that right?
Yep, correct.
Mark Rosewater has this great story where he was at a con, and so was Jeremy Jarvis, who was the artist.
Him.
And in the same set, he has Loxodon Warhammer, which is a big elephant, awesome hammer, and he was really expecting people to be really excited about Loxodon Warhammer. And he kept getting really frustrated. Mark said, "What's wrong?" He's like, I kept expecting them liking the hammer, but all they do is keep bringing me these stupid boots. Yeah. It's just like, no, man. Lightning Greaves is insane. Lightning Greaves.
Real.
This was, when they're going to make mistakes with any card type, with any idea, it's going to be the first few out, right? If they're going to screw up with vehicles, the Smuggler's Copter happens. And when they screw up with equipment, Lightning Greaves happens. And it's not so much screw up in terms of like, wow, that's a really powerful effect for nothing.
No, but we have to live with the consequences forever.
We sure do. And this is one of them. And again, $5, all those printings, like that, there's a reason. You run this in practically everything. Like, it hurts nothing. It's super efficient, super powerful, and it has a great story about Jeremy Jarvis and the boots.
Love Jeremy Jarvis.
Yeah, which is awesome. Ruben, what's your number 1?
I anticipated what Evan's number 1 was going to be. So I cheated a little bit. I metagamed a little bit and didn't put the number 1 that, according to my research, should have been the number 1. It's banned in a format. It's got the Pro Tour wins. It's in the cube. It's still in the finals of the bracket, the MTG bracket. It's got a promo printing. I cheated a little bit because this doesn't have a Pro Tour win. It doesn't really have a promo.
Which is crazy.
But it got banned so fast. It got kicked out of the game so quickly. This would 100%, if it didn't get banned, be by far and away the winner of having the most Pro Tour top 8s, having the most wins, being the most prestigious and ultimate. And I'm going to let Evan tell his great story about this card because it's a great story about this card. But my number 1, Skull Clamp.
Yeah.
It's Jesus, this card.
This is one of those, like, I've told this story so many times. I'm just like, man, how many times tell a story? Because you've never been told on the same cast.
Every time, it's great.
It's great. Look, man.
Skull Clamp is a 1 color. You may have sensed a theme that I like low to the ground costing. Costs 1, equips for 1. It's an uncommon originally from Darksteel. All right. And so powerful, so iconic for being so powerful, in fact, that they put it in From the Vault Exiled as one of the poster children for being too good. Equipped creature gets +1/-1. Whenever equipped creature dies, draw 2 cards.
2 cards.
2 cards.
Wow.
What in the world is this card? I mean, obviously it was super powerful whenever it was in standard, it was insane. Obviously you had Skull Clamp Affinity for half a second, which was a force to be reckoned with at Pro Tour Kobe. You see it occasionally in, for example, No Banlist Modern. It doesn't really see a ton of play in Vintage, partially because creatures and 1/1s aren't really a piece of the metagame. There's no way to fit that into the Bazaar of Baghdad, Mishra's Workshop, Library of Alexandria metagame that it sort of exists as the 3 sort of land pillars of the format. There's no room there, really, for a Skull Clamp deck, maybe in the future. But the card itself, you just cannot deny the power level of it. Things like Elf Clamp, were super powerful. Anytime that you had any sort of tribe, elves, goblins, whatever, that could take advantage of this, not to mention things like Disciple of the Vault, where you could take advantage of all of the card draw potential of Skullclamp, refilling your hand with cheap spells, powering through your thought casts and getting out even more affinity creatures and more cheap creatures and things to be able to take advantage of the powerful Skullclamp.
I have this. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I have this in my Locust God EDH deck, where if you have this in Ashnod's Altar and the Locust God, you just go infinite. I did this yesterday. I had a friend of mine who cloned my Locust God, and so we both had Locust Gods out, and I was trying to race him by trying to make more Locusts. And I didn't have the Altar, but I did have just plain old Skullclamp. And so I'm just doing this thing of, like, put it on a Locust, down 1, draw 2, do the thing, make a Locust. And I'm trying to dig for an answer so that I can fight him. And it's just how absurd it is even just by itself, and just in a deck that's dedicated to doing that sort of thing. It's just so good. I have it in my Marchesa deck to put on Assemble the Legion tokens.
I mean, this is another one.
Not bad.
It was printed in every Commander deck. It printed 2011 and then 2014 through 2017. And the Commander Anthology and stuff like that. I mean, this is the classic. The classic Wizards changed it at the last minute. They didn't test it. They had no idea what they were doing. They were already not knowing what they were doing with equipment. And then they screwed up and changed this one at the last second. It used to be +1/+1. And then they're like, wait a minute, that's too much value. Let's make it +1/-1. So we'll have a
that
drawback.
It immediately dies.
Yeah, we'll have a drawback, guys. That'll fix it.
Yikes.
And they accidentally the whole equipment. And this is the card I also love to brag about to Rosewater and Forsyth, is that Skullclamp brought me back to Magic. When I left Magic in Exodus, I didn't touch Magic for years. I had no idea what was going on. I saw like Urza Saga boosters or something like in a bookstore, and I was like, I used to play. I don't play anymore. But when I came back and I was like, what's going on with Magic? And I pulled up the Wizards website, and that was the day that they were previewing Skullclamp. And I was like, I have not played this game in like 4 or 5 years. What in the hell are they doing? If this thing ain't busted, I don't know what's going on anymore. It turns out it was busted. So that's great. And this one, go ahead.
I feel so bad now because the card that got me back to Magic was Splinter Fright.
Each his own. But regardless, the Skullclamp was just one of those cards that, for me, again, I was amazed by the power level and the possibilities, and I didn't really know sort of how bad it was. I just knew, hey, Magic's back, and there's this crazy deck, and this thing's ridiculous, and let's go for it. So
I'm trying to think of the card that brought me back to Magic. I guess it would have had to have been like Rakdos Guildmage.
It's so fitting for all of us. Like,
weird. Oh no, Hit Run. That's the one.
There we go.
All right.
Sweet. But yeah, Skullclamp is a force to be reckoned with in and of itself.
Unbelievable. Just like the blatant disrespect of this card. Like
it's one of those you look
at
back
this card and
like,
compare it to literally any other card draw engine, and you're just like, what in the world were you thinking?
Well, speaking of Wizards and mistakes, speaking of last minute changes that break things, and thinking of the poster child of all those things, of the creme de la creme. Not only does it have all these things going for it, it's from Kamigawa blocks, so it's got that extra special, that spice. It's that spice, y'all. I'm telling you.
It's got the Salt Bay.
It's got that Japanese flavor.
Oh, it so does, and it's so good. Because Umezawa Jite is just it's lauded. It is in the halls. You know what I mean? It will be forever enshrined as, in my mind, the greatest equipment ever made. Because Wizards will never get anywhere close to something as stupid as this.
Of course.
Umezawa Jite is a 2 generic mana, rare legendary artifact equipment from Betrayers of Kamigawa. Whenever a equipped creature deals combat damage, put 2 charge counters on Umezawa Jite. Remove a charge counter from Umezawa Jite, Note, the creature doesn't get that ability. It just has that ability. So whether or not a creature is attached to it, you may choose one of these. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, or you gain 2 life. Now, and it has equip for 2 generic mana. So this card is absolutely banana bonkers, stupid, crazy. If you've never played this card, my God, play this card because it's dumb. Now, the issue with this card, the problem with this card was the middle ability. The middle ability originally said add 2 generic mana to your mana pool. Well, here's the thing. Because mana abilities can't be countered, that means that any of those 3 abilities can't be countered because the mana ability is part of it when you use it. And they didn't want that to happen. They wanted you to be able to react or respond or stifle it or whatever crazy stuff you want to do. So they're like, oh, we'll just, it's +2/+2, we'll just make it -1/-1. That'll be okay. That won't make anything stupid. It made a lot stupid. And it just broke the thing wide open. And this card ran the format. It was in the Rat's Nest Pre-con, which made store owners super
the Rat's
pissed.
Nest Pre-con still to this day one of the most expensive things you can buy on the secondary market.
Oh yeah.
There are so many things wrong with this card. Number one, the combat damage. Normally things like this, you have to hit the player. Like normally, oh no, just plain old combat. Like you can get chump blocked and that's combat damage and you don't care because you're going to get counters on it. Two, why does the charge counter thing? Why? I remember, I know what you mean, Evan. I used to think if I just killed the creature, you know, I talked earlier in the show about how equipment tends to need to be attached to something to do its thing. This doesn't. You can kill the creature, and if, God forbid, there are a number of charge counters stockpiled on this thing, it's cool. You can just remove them. That doesn't need to have a creature on it to matter. Like, there's just so many questions about this card where it's like, why? Why?
I mean, I know they wanted to make it good. I get it, and it was cool. And again, it was in the early days of equipment. They didn't really know what they were doing. Last minute changes that they didn't test, which is like, it's just this classic serial formula now. And I think they've done their best to correct all the processes that have something like that. You know what I mean? Where they changed it at the last minute and they hit the print button, because this just broke. It just broke. Everyone was playing for this card. You were playing this card even if you didn't really have a lot of creatures to put it on, just so you could kill their copy. Because at the time, if two legends were out, they both died. So like, I'll play Jits just to stop you. I'll play Seal of Jitte, essentially, is what you're doing.
Yeah.
And lastly, am I saying it right? Is it Jitte? I've always been told
Jitte.
different thing. Jitte.
I believe it's Jitte.
I've heard it all sorts of ways.
Is it Jitte or Jitte? Right? Like, I don't know. I'm just Southern. Help me.
I mean,
card is busted.
You're allowed to say it how you want, really, but it's, you know.
And no matter how you say it, it's busted.
That's how you pronounce it. Broken.
Broken. And that was awesome. That was also our top 10 equipment cards. You will see them on the screen right now for your review. Please take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about, and we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate for CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you. I hope we brought the proper equipment today.
Wow. And you keep that health up, buddy. Keep that.
I will
stuff
do
going.
my best.
Moving here to our final slide, I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, my co-hosts, Aaron Campbell, Ruben Bressler, you guys for watching or listening, and hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe, do everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at Magic Mikes, on Twitter at Magic Mikes Cast, our Magic Mikes subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Talk to us privately at MagicMikesPodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at MagicMikesPodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes, or join us here next week. Same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.